What's on, guys? Jay Hoyt back with you. Today, welcome back to some more NHL videos. It's trade deadline time, and we just got off of making the last NHL video about the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, within that video, we talked a tiny bit about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins made me realize that there's kind of two teams in the same exact spot. And I want to talk about what these guys should do and going forward and their future plans and what do they do now. So those two teams are the Penguins and the Washington Capitals. So when looking at both of these teams in the playoff races right now, let me just see from the wild card perspective. So I know we mentioned Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is at 64 points. So they are 8 points out of the last wild card spot. And the Washington Capitals are only 1 point ahead of them. So they are, again, similar, very, very similar spots where these other teams are just ahead of them. Now, when we look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and we see the roster, there's kind of 3 or 4, maybe even 5 or 6 players that you think of that are like, how is this team losing? And those players, of course, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, you think of like Brian Rust, you think of Jake Getzel, you think of Erik Karlsson, you think of Chris Letang, and you're wondering how in the world is this team not performing and not doing well. So ever since the Pittsburgh Penguins won in 2016, they've made it to the playoffs every single year until last year. Last year they went middle of the table, did not make the playoffs. They finished in 9th. I'm guessing that's in the Eastern Conference. Maybe that's in the... I don't think it's the league. So that must be in the Eastern Conference. And then this year, they're looking like a similar story. Middle of the pack, not making the playoffs. So, as much as I hate to say it, what do the Pittsburgh Penguins do? Specifically talking about the Penguins, if you look at their salary cap and look at their team, the soonest kind of superstar you have is Sidney Crosby. He is under contract for one more year at $8.7 million. He's 36 years old, and he will be 30, I think it's 38, because when's his birthday? August 7th. So he'll be 38 when this contract expires, or soon thereafter this contract expires. And being a 38-year-old, star player, you're thinking of like, all right, if we're not winning, is it time to move on? And I don't know if he wants to do that. Now, obviously, that would be up to him himself because he has the full no move. He doesn't have a no trade. He just has no move. I don't know exactly how that all works, but he has a no move contract. Malkin is a year older and has an extra year on his contract. So after this year, he has 2 more years at a somehow $6.1 million contract. They also have Raquel under contract for a bunch more years. Riley Smith for another year. Jeff Carter's up this year. And then they have some bottom 6 guys that are kind of hit or miss on their contracts. Defensively, though, they have Karlsson and Letang both locked up for a while. Ryan Graves locked up for a while. Marcus Pettersson locked up for at least until next year. And they have Tristan Jarry locked up for a few more years as well. So before I give my final verdict on the Penguins, I want to go take a look at the Washington Capitals. Because, again, they are in the same boat. Almost exactly the same boat. Where Ovechkin, 2 more years at $9.5 million. They have Tom Wilson, they just signed a contract with. Dylan Strome just signed a big contract. He's locked up for the next 4 years. Then you have Max Pacioretty, who's old, but again, he's there. Sonny Milano signed up for the next few years. Then they have a lot of young guys on their roster. And they just signed a guy who I don't think I've ever heard of, Alexi Protas. I don't know if I butchered that one right, but he signed a big 5-year deal. I think it was 5 years I think it was a 5-year deal at $3.3 million. After this is his 3rd year in the NHL. And he has 26 points this year in 59 games. And overall, at least on paper, on the stat sheet, doesn't really look to be anything great. But obviously, I don't watch their games. I don't know what he's all about. But he signed a big contract that goes into effect next year. Then defensively, again, similar story. They have John Carlson locked up for 2 more years after this year. Nick Jensen, 2 more years. Trevor Van Riemsdyk, 2 more years. Ethan Bear for another year. Joel Edmondson expires this year. They actually just signed Sandin to a 5-year deal, something like that. So he's locked up for a little bit. And they have both of their goalies locked up for a few, at least until next year, and their Kemper up for another 3 years. So they have their guys, right? They have a few guys on injured reserve: TJ Oshie, Farabee, and Nick Dowd, along with Nicholas Backstrom, who's been out. I don't know if he officially retired or if he's just recovering from some big surgery. And they just sent Evgeny Kuznetsov down to the AHL through waivers after he cleared the player assistant program. So he has at least 1 more year at $6.65 million. So, you have, again, a similar story with older guys, kind of that older generation being phased out. And what do they do, right? What do the Capitals and the Penguins do? And as far as the Washington Capitals go, they are in a similar story as Pittsburgh, where ever since they won the Cup in 2017 and making the playoffs for a good amount of time, last year they did not make the playoffs. And this year, most likely will miss the playoffs unless they completely turn things around. But there's 2 kind of different stories here as far as their coaching staff. Now, I know not always the coaching staff is the solution if they fire them or fire their head coach, promote their assistant. You never know that. But in this case, they have a brand new coach in there. He's never been a head coach at the NHL level. He's been an assistant coach with Toronto, and then he was the Hershey Bears head coach for a few years. So, he's never coached in the NHL. But here's what I would say. You also have Pittsburgh, that has had Mike Sullivan ever since 2016-2017, where he's been there for a while. Now, I feel like this could be a similar story to what Bruce Cassidy did in Boston, where they were with him for so long, things started to not look great, but they wanted to kind of get a new voice in the locker room. And although Mike Sullivan's a great coach, obviously he's done very well in his short amount of time in the league. I can't even say short amount of time in the league so far. He's done great, but it just might be time for a new voice there because, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 full years, and we'll say 8.5 years as the Pittsburgh head coach. And it just might be time to get a new voice in that locker room and just kind of give it the Bruce Cassidy effect, where, Bruce Cassidy was still a great coach. He still, had the backing of the players, but just something needed to change. So he goes over to Vegas. Obviously, we know what happened there. The banner behind me, they won the Stanley Cup. So, in this case, it might be time to part ways with Mike Sullivan, get somebody new in there, kind of change that voice in the locker room, and then the next thing I would do is say to Sidney Crosby, to Malkin, and even to Letang, and maybe a couple of other guys in there, be like, what do you guys want to do? Now, I know that's the front office staff saying that, what do you guys want to do? But here's what I would do, right? If Crosby still says, I want to be a Penguin for life, I don't want to go to another team, but I want to win still, then here's what I would do. Give it 3 years, right? Give it 3 more years. Then you have Crosby, signing a 1-year deal maybe at the end of that, trying to figure stuff out. Malkin's at the end of his contract. Letang would still be signed for a few more years. But by that point, either you're going the right direction or you're not. And with Crosby, with Malkin, and even with the rest of the guys, you need to try to win now, right? You're never going to have another Sidney Crosby on your team. Now, you might have some good players. You might draft a player eventually that is a generational player, but he will never be a Sidney Crosby. But I would give it 3 years, right? After 3 years, be like, hey, for the betterment of the franchise, we need to rebuild this, right? We need to get back some young players and get some youth back into this program and figure it out again. Because you have some young players. I don't know what they have for prospects-wise. I don't know what they've been drafting like. But you probably have some players in the system that are working their way up, that are getting there, that are getting game time, that are getting better, that are still developing. And at some point, as much as you want to do the right thing for Crosby, for Malkin, for Letang, for those guys, you need to, at the end of the day, produce a good plan for the Penguins. And it's the same thing for the Washington Capitals, where you say to Ovi, and you say to John Carlson, you say to, those older guys, you say to Pacioretty if he's still there, you say to TJ Oshie, you say to those guys, hey, we're going to give you 3 years, right? And even for Ovechkin, it might be sooner than that because he is 38 already, and his birthday's in September. So he'll be 40 years old when his contract expires. So I would just tell him, we're going to try to win and try to do the right things as much as we can do for the next 3 years. But then after that, no matter what you want to do, we need to go through a rebuild, right? We need to get some young players in here. We need to get that youth in there. We need to draft well. It might suck for the next 5 years after that, but we need to rebuild this, right? We went all in. We went winning mentality for so long. But at some point, you've won for so long, and that's kind of what Chicago did too. And even what Detroit did for a little bit. They were so win that it caught up to them. Their older players retired. They moved on. They signed with a different team in the offseason. They're no longer with that team. They had to rebuild. They had to draft. They have to get younger. And in the case where, I'm looking at both these teams, you look at, let's just start with the Penguins. Crosby, 36. Malkin, 37. Raquel, 30. Riley Smith, 32. Jeff Carter, 39. Lars Eller, 34. Akari, 34. Or 32, sorry. Then under that, you have like 5 or 6 players that are like mid-20s. Defensively, Erik Karlsson, 33. Chris Letang, 36. Graves and Peterson, 28, 27, respectively. So you got some older guys. And even Brian Rust, 31. You have Jake Getzel, who's 29. You have some older guys there that, especially with Pittsburgh's case, with all those 30-year-olds, you're going to have to start winning, or else by the time they're going to be anything good, it's going to be too late. You go take a look at Washington, Ovechkin, 38. Tom Wilson, Dylan Strome are both a little bit younger, but Max Pacioretty, 35. You have Backstrom, who's 36. Kuznetsov, who's 31. TJ Oshie, 37. I'm kind of picking these guys out because they are older, but half of them are injured, half of them are on IR. So again, I give them 3 years. I say let's try to win for 3 years. After that, we're going to have to rebuild. So let's try to do what we can in 3 years, try to get that all done. And then after that, they're going to have to restart, rebuild, trade away their stars and start from the ground up with some youth and to get some prospects in there. And it sucks, but at the end of the day, kind of all of the teams that have been good for so long, you look at Chicago as a perfect example of that, right there on top of the world, multiple championships. Kane was there for a little bit, but now he's gone. Taves is out. Duncan Keith's gone. Brent Seabrook's gone. Patrick Sharp's gone. Jalmerson's gone. All those guys are gone. And now what do? They suck. They draft. They get Connor Bedard. And now look at them. So some teams have to go through this, and it sucks if you're in Pittsburgh and in Washington that expect, greatness, expect championships. But when it kind of caught up to you in this case, and if it were up to me, I'd have a 3-year plan of, let's try to do what we can in 3 years. Be a little bit of a cautious buyer of let's not try to get sucked into, big deals and big contracts and everything else, because that's the goal, right? Win while these guys are here. Then after that, we're going to miss them, but let's restart, let's rebuild, let's get the youth back in, and then figure it out from there. But that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know of your thoughts and comments down in the comment section below. What should they do? Specifically talking about the Penguins and the Caps. But of course, any teams, anything you want to talk about, let me know down below. But as always, guys, leave a like if you did enjoy. Subscribe if you haven't already. As always, guys, we'll see you in the